In a prison in Thailand, Lee is making a drawing by using paint from the wall mixed with water and feather tips that he keeps hidden in a book. He also makes a fake stamp that Lee puts on an envelope. Meanwhile, a guard is asking prisoners if they have any mail to send home, although he only takes letters from those who can bribe him. When he reached Lee's cell, he was distracted by another prisoner throwing a fit, and Lee threw his envelope in the guard's bag. After the guard is gone, Lee thanks the other prisoners, revealing that he misbehaved as a distraction. At that moment, a guard came to take Lee out of his cell, saying that he's been extradited to Hong Kong. Lee travels with Detective Ho in a convoy and watches everyone carefully. At the police station, detectives go over the details of an old case. 2 years ago, 7 armored truck guards were killed on a Canadian highway. 4 months later, the Golden Triangle Merlin Gorilla was attacked, resulting in 82 dead and 157 injured. Last year, there was a murder arson at a printing mill. Later, at a hotel, a cop and an art dealer were found dead. All these murders are connected to an international counterfeit syndicate, and most of its members were killed. Only 2 survivors remain. Lee and his boss are known as Painter. His identity and location are a total mystery, so the police only have one blurry photo of him in Canada. Pa asks Lee for information about Painter, but Lee is afraid that he'll get killed if he talks and starts crying. Suddenly, an explosion blew up the office, bringing the ceiling down on Lee and the cops. However, this is just Lee explaining what Painter is capable of. Ho isn't scared, so Lee starts freaking out, asking to be sent back to jail. A detective takes him to a cell and punches him. Moments later, Lee is given some food, which has a sedative that knocks him out. The cops use the chance to get hair, skin, saliva, and blood samples. When Lee wakes up, he's taken back to Ho's office. A detective explains that the samples match the shooting at the hotel, so Lee will be charged with murder. Lee freaks out as he claims that the evidence is fake and says they can't scare him into talking. Ho tries to threaten Lee, but she's interrupted by the officer who informs her of an important meeting. In another office, Ho discovers that famous artist Yuan and her lawyers want to bail Lee out. The lawyers point out that the evidence isn't very good and they can tell Lee is being set up, but the police still refuse to let him go. Instead, they offered a deal. If Yuan convinces Lee to talk about Painter, they'll release him. In the interrogation room, Yuan tells Lee about the deal. He reminds her that talking would put them in danger, but Yuan wants the cops to catch Painter because he killed her fiancé. Lee agreed to talk just to help her, so he sits in front of the camera and starts sharing a story. In 1985, Lee met Yuan in Vancouver. They're both talented painters trying to have a career, but nobody wants to buy their art. A decade later, they barely have any money to survive, and their home loses power because of unpaid bills. Desperate for real income, Lee goes to an art gallery and makes a deal to create counterfeit paintings. When he goes home, he overhears Yuan talking to her manager. The man admires Yuan's creative art, but insults Lee's, saying he only copies other artists. However, Yuan doesn't want him to represent her if he doesn't. Take Lee as well. That night, Lee turns on the lights, revealing he paid the bill because a gallery has bought all his paintings. As part of the deal, he's gotten a solo show for Yuan next month. Sometime later, Yuan went to the gallery workshop to visit Lee and discovered that his new job is forging art, not creating it. She thinks he doesn't give his skills enough credit, but Lee has given up on regular art and explains that doing these forgeries is actually thrilling. Yuan says she loves him, but she's very disappointed in him. Yuan's art show lasts many days, but Lee doesn't show up until the last one. He's angry because she's hung up one of his paintings along with hers without his permission. Yuan claims some collectors are interested in it, but Lee knows that she sold everything except that one. At that moment, the painter started mocking Lee's painting for imitating the classic art masters. Guests laugh, but Yuan throws a drink in his face and kicks him out. Lee followed him to apologize, only for Painter to reveal he bought one of Lee's copies. He made a scene on purpose to talk to him in private. They go to a bar and Lee talks about his forging techniques that help his art look old. Painter explains he's in the forging business and wants Lee to work with him, so he leaves him his card. In the gallery, Yuan is arguing with her manager. He's angry that she ruined her show by making a scene and that they can't declare a total sold out because Lee's painting is the only one left. Suddenly, Lee entered the gallery and proceeds to burn his painting. The next day, Lee contacts Painter, who welcomes him to the team before giving him his first job to recreate a $100 bill. Lee freaks out, desperate to do something so dangerous. Painter promises that the job won't be linked to him and shares some secrets to gain his trust. His name is Kwok, and he comes from 3 generations of counterfeits from Hong Kong. Nobody in his family has ever gone to jail, and they always play by the rules. His team only does distribution, and his buyers are powerful people who keep him protected. However, Lee still refused to participate. When Lee gets home, he discovers that Yuan is moving to the USA. This makes him change his mind. So, moments later, he's on a plane to Thailand with Fukong, who promises to help Lee get yuan back. Then, he shares some details about the job. The US government released a new dollar bill design with more details that even include microprint words, which has made it difficult to forge. Lee says they'll need a more meticulous printing plate. So, Fukong introduces him to plate maker Yam. The team also has Administrator Wu and brothers Sham and Bobby for logistics and security. W mentions that they'll need color-shifting ink, and Yam starch-free paper to trick the want's counterfeit detector. Pens. Its ink turns purple on normal paper, but yellow on starch-free paper from bills. Fukong promises he'll figure it out. Meanwhile, he wants Lee to concentrate on the watermark, which is made from the fibers between the paper. In Thailand, the team settles in an abandoned workshop. Lee spends several days practicing the details from the dollar bills, from the letters to the strands of hair. Eventually, he achieves a perfect result. One night during dinner, the team looks at a Chinese painting and bets money on its authenticity. Most of the team thinks it's fake, but Lee thinks it's real and even tells them about the technique behind it. Chinese artists can cut up their paintings into layers, and yet the paint will be identical in all of them. Lee wins the bet, and Fukong explains that they'll use that method for their bills. They'll push the pattern with an iron drum before the pole hardens. Once it's hard, the pattern will become the watermark and they'll sandwich it between two other layers. Yam points out that they can put the security thread in the middle layer, too. For the next few weeks, the team works on the precision of the details. They mix colors to find the right shade of paint, and Yam uses all his knowledge to make a plate that paints with 1/1000th of a millimeter precision. It took them 2 months and 17 prototypes to reach the perfect one. Lee enjoys working with Yam and uses the opportunity to ask questions about Fukong. Yam confirms that nobody in the family was ever arrested, although Fukong's father argued with some Russians over money and was killed. Yam shows Lee a picture of his daughters, explaining that they think he sells antiques. They are still missing the paper, but W couldn't find anything that passed the pen test. Fukong announces they'll solve this by traveling to Eastern Europe. It turns out they use starch-free paper to print phone books, because there it's not regulated like in the USA. First, they stopped at an auction to buy an industrial printer. Then Fukong puts on a disguise to pretend to be a disabled man and claims to work for a charity that prints educational comic books. He talks to the boss of a phone book manufacturing company who at first refused to sell to them. However, he changed his mind when Lee told him this is for the kids in Africa. Soon the printer and all the papers are in the workshop. In just a matter of minutes, they manage to print a realistic dollar bill. They only need to fix the shade of the ink. Sometime later, Lee returned to Vancouver to drop off his key, leaving it on a desk because he refuses to meet Yuan. On the drive back, Fukong calls Lee a coward and points out that Yuan's very successful show is named after the painting Lee burned. An argument ensues and Fuksang stops the car to yell at Lee, saying that giving up on Yuan is giving up on himself. Suddenly, Fukong leaves the car and puts on a mask before pulling out a gun. On his seat, Lee finds a bulletproof vest and a second gun. There's an armored car in the middle of the road, and when a guard sees the guys, he opens fire. Lee panics and puts on the vest while Sand shoots back, quickly, killing one of the guards. However, he failed to bring down the others, so one of his men had to shoot them from a distance. He also shoots the tires of the armored car. The rest of the team shows up in a vehicle, and together they overpower the security employees. After they tie them up, they open the armored car and steal several cans of ink. Another guard is hiding behind the cans, and Lee freezes at the sight of his gun. Fukong pushes him out of the way and is thrown back by a bullet. Furious, he starts shooting repeatedly to kill the guy, ignoring his men when they tell him to let it go. Before they leave, Fukong blows up the armored car with all the employees inside. At the workshop, Lee shows his disapproval of killing for their business, and says he'll leave the team after figuring out how to make ink with the right shade. Fukong throws his glass on the ground in fury, but sarcastically tells Lee to do whatever he wants. Afterward, Fukong travels all over the world to deliver suitcases of fake money to some of the biggest crime lords. Soon, the team has huge piles of real money to enjoy. Meanwhile, Lee finds a car with the exact shade of green they need. He acquires the paints that the car factory uses and manages to mix a tone that works perfectly with their paper. Now they won't have to steal paint again. One day, the team is visited by people sent by a Thai crime boss known as the General. Fukong has a drink with the General's right hand and his counterfeit expert Chong, who admires the quality of the bill's art. At that moment, Lee walked down the corridor and accidentally trips, spilling green paint all over the glass door. As he looks up, he shares a look with Chong. After the visitors left, Fukong yelled at Lee, but he calmed down when he realized that they've perfected the paint. The next day, Fuksang told Lee that he bought a resort under his name so he can retire with Yuan. They travel to a compound in the middle of nowhere and meet with the General. Fukong hands Lee a detonator, telling him to hide it until he gives him a signal. While walking around the compound, Li was dismayed to see guards shooting civilians. The general tries big. Make a good deal with Fukong, claiming that he used to be good friends with his father. However, Fukong knows that the general hired the Russians who killed his father and reveals he came here for revenge. He opens his jacket to reveal some explosives and tells Li to drop the detonator. At first, Li refused. But since the guards are threatening to shoot, he has no choice but to drop it anyway. A car explodes near them, destroys the room, but fails to kill anyone. The general tries to run away, so Fukong shoots him in the leg. A few guards surround him, but Fukong fights them and takes their guns to kill them. More guards appear outside and take the general away while starting a shootout with Fukong. After lots of wasted bullets, the guards threw a grenade. Fukong rolls out of the room right before it explodes. Then Fukong managed to kill several guards and ended up getting shot in the shoulder. When more men come after him, Chong starts bombing the compound from afar, destroying most of the buildings and killing most of the army. Fukong gets bigger guns and starts shooting down the survivors, not stopping even when he's wounded again. Unfortunately, more soldiers keep coming, so Fukong is forced to hide behind a pile of bags. At that moment, the rest of the team bursts into the compound in a jeep, throwing grenades to cause more destruction. In the woods, Sham is trying to run away, but the soldiers surround him and open fire, causing him to lose his arm. This fallen hand loses its grip on a grenade, and it blows up, killing all the guards with one explosion. At the compound, Li notices that Sa-ching is caught on fire. He runs into a burning building just to put out the flames with his jacket. Then, he carried her out. Fukong and the team keep shooting guards until the general appears in a truck to fire back. Bobby pushes Fukong and is knocked out instead. Then Fukong makes a risky jump to shoot the truck driver, followed by a shot at the tires. This causes the truck to crash, and the general finally dies. Fukong takes the general's ring and allows Li to bring Sa-ching with them. On their way out, the last explosion finishes destroying the area. Afterward, the team stayed hidden for a year in the past. Golden Triangle. Sa-ching is taken to the hospital to heal her injuries, and Fukong gets her a fake passport with Yuan's name. Li doesn't approve, but Fukong ignores him. Sometime later at an art gallery, Fukong buys all of Yuan's paintings and tells Li he'll send them to the resort so he can impress her. However, Li thinks Yuan won't like receiving dirty money. When Li started to scold him, they're interrupted by some reporters following Yuan to ask her about her engagement to her manager. The news upset Li, so he leaves. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong police calls Wing Chit, a counterfeit expert from the Canadian Federal Police. Ho has been trying to find the gang that has been putting fake dollar bills in the market all over the world. So, Wing Chit will help her. Together, they started looking at an antique store that belongs to Yam. Later, Ho and Wing Chit pretend to be potential buyers and start talking to various brokers until they're invited to a boat party that the infamous painter is supposed to attend. However, they're disappointed to discover that painter has sent Shaman Bobby instead of coming himself. Wing Chit pretends to be aggressively offended, and the brothers bring out their guns just to test him. When they tease Ho, Wing Chit immediately defends her and proves he's cool by jumping into the water with her. The brothers agree he's trusted, so W appears on another boat and throws a bag with a phone, telling Wing Chit to wait for a call. At the same time, in a yacht, Fukong argued with Li because he's discovered that he's leaving with Sa-ching without his approval. Furious, Fukong grabs Li and seems he's about to attack, but he's interrupted by the team announcing that the new clients are ready. They tell him that these clients are vouchered for by one of Yam's antique clients, causing Fukong to remember Wing Chit hanging outside the store. The team rushes back to the workshop, and Yam learns that one of his clients set him up. Yam begs for mercy, but Fukong shoots him to death anyway. Li freaks out, and Fukong tries to shoot him, too. However, Li grabs the gun and the shot misses. Fukong punches him instead. Afterward, the team burns down the workshop to get rid of all evidence. Later in the city, Ho puts trackers in Wing Chit's watch and phone before he meets with the painter, unaware that the gang knows they're cops. After he leaves, Ho looks at his lighter and finds a note asking her out. In a hotel, Wing Chit meets with the team, and Fukong tries to sell him the plate instead of the forged bills, saying he's retiring from the business. Since Wing Chit turns him down, Fukong asks Li to kill him. Since Li hesitates, Wing Chit jumps on him to try to get the gun, only for Fukong to shoot him down. Then Fukong gets angry because Li continues to be a coward. He drags him to the bedroom and reveals that he's captured Yuan and her fiancé, who are tied up and blindfolded. Fukong tells Li to kill the manager. However, Li points the gun at him instead. Fukong knows he won't dare and earns to kill the manager, so Li runs to rescue Yuan. The whole team opens fire while the duo takes cover. Suddenly, Sa-ching shows up and stabs Hua from behind, causing her to shoot a chandelier that crashes on the table. Then, she uses Hua's gun to kill the brothers, but Fuxang manages to hide behind the door. When Fukong offered Li for his freedom, Li was finally brave enough to shoot Fukong in the chest several times. Li doesn't want to abandon Yuan. However, Saching convinces him they're in danger, so they leave together. Afterward, Li and Saching hide in the resort. They followed the news and learned that the police didn't find Fukong's body. Also, Yam's whole family was killed. One day, Li informs Saching he's leaving because Yuan will hold a memorial for her fiancé, and he's afraid that Fukong will attack her there. In the city, he tries to pay for a cafe with forged money, but the cops surround him and beat him up. When Li was dragged to the police van, he saw Fukong nearby waving a flyer for Yuan's show. In the present, Li finishes his story and helps a cop make sketches of Chong and Fukong. Ho grants him bail, but he must stay in town and report to the police every day. That night in the hotel, Li apologized to Yuan and they got naughty. Meanwhile, Ho is shocked to see Fukong arrive in a police uniform and enter the station. She immediately sent her men to capture him, but the guy is truly confused. He told them all his personal information, confirming he's just a normal cop. Ho realized that Li saw him when they took him out of prison and used his description to lie throughout the story. It turns out there's no luxurious. Li was the painter all along. The woman who came to rescue him wasn't the real Yuan. It was Saching. When Li took her to the hospital to heal her burns, he asked the surgeons to make her look like his ex Li's letter had been for her, and included a portrait of her original face. Saching was the one who kidnapped Yuan and her fiancé, saying that if she had to replace Yuan, the real one had to die. Li survived the shootout thanks to a bulletproof vest and stabbing Zhwa. It was Saching he saw on the street when he was arrested. Now Li and Saching escape from the country on a boat. However, Saching becomes tired of being Yuan's replacement because Li will never love the real her. She calls the police and soon they're surrounded. The boat also had a bomb and Saching detonates it, so they both died in front of the cops. Sometime later, Ho finds the real Yuan and tells her that she is fiancé's killer is dead. While showing her a picture of Li, Yuan revealed that Li had been a creepy relationship neighbor obsessed with her, so they had also been a lie. He entered the forging business hoping to win her over. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.